All right, everyone. This is a super exciting one because, first of all, we're doing our first roundtable. So I'm just going to be moderating with Jen and Will and these incredible guests we have, Morgan Smith and Nicholas Thickett from Aligned, who are the masters of social selling. And what's really cool about today, I think, is that we're really going to focus on social selling and how effective that is. And I actually posted today promoting this event. And one of the things that I found was a stat that you are 51% more likely to hit your quota if you're social selling. But it sounds like a big idea. How do you actually do that? So that's what we're doing today, is making sure that you actually understand how to actually do this, how to apply this. If you're a sales leader, what that actually looks like. So real quick around the table, we got Jen Allen. Now are you head of community at Lavender?
We don't have heads of anything. It's just community.
I love that. Okay, so Jen is now at Lavender. Super excited for that. We've got Morgan Smith in Denver and Nicholas Thickett in Calgary, another Canuck. Canadians are taking over social apparently today. And then, of course, y'all know Will. So, Will, why are you wearing a suit today, brother?
I came straight from filming a little bit for another video. That's why I was a little bit late, kept you all on your toes. And in that video, I'm wearing a suit. So I didn't have time to change. And now I'm going to just roll with it because I look sharp.
I love it.
You do.
By the way, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I'm going to be following the chat. So drop them in. If you want to actually maybe do a tag to Nick so that I'm seeing it. But I will do my best to make sure your questions are getting answered. So I'm going to start with like the very most basic question. Morgan, what are the benefits of social selling?
Oh, whoa. That's right out of the gate. Why should you do this thing?
We're going fast and hard today.
Fast and hard. I like it. Well, besides the fact that apparently 51%, you're 51% more likely to achieve quota. Honestly, the thing I think about the most is that all of us, so many buyers, us as buyers, and then the buyers we sell to, are making up their minds about who they trust and who they perceive to be credible far before an SDR, an account executive, or anybody else picks up the phone and calls them. And it's not that, cold calling or cold emailing doesn't work. Of course it can, right? No channel is dead. But the trust and the credibility that you can earn happens where buyers are naturally showing up in social Slack community, right? On LinkedIn, in other online digital communities. Well, there's now two Nicks. Oh God, this is going to be dangerous. If I showed up in Nick Capozzi, if I wanted to sell Nick Capozzi, I'll just call you Capozzi today if you're okay with that. And I showed up in your comments for 3 weeks on every post that you posted, and I added something meaningful. By the time I sent you an email, you've got this recollection in your head of like, oh, I know this guy. Yeah, let me pay attention. And so now you have a reason to pay attention. That's the thing I always think about.
I love that. And I think what you're trying to do, whether it's brand or social selling, is you just want to be giving value so that people are aware of you. And then when they are ready to pull the trigger on that type of product or service, they're thinking about you. Marcin, you asked for the store, that stat. It's in my post that I posted a couple hours ago. It's the top comment, but you can also DM me and I'm happy to get that to you directly. Will, let me ask you, what is the difference in your opinion between social selling and dark social? Or is there a difference and they're kind of tied together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say they can be tied together, but I would look at them as two different concepts. So social selling to me would be a bit more building awareness on a one-to-one basis. Dark social is kind of like the conversations that happen that you're not there for. So that's like in communities, everything like that. To me, social selling at its most basic level is building awareness with your prospects using social media. So exactly like Morgan said, when they're ready to pull the trigger, they pull the trigger. And that's all more like a rep level, I would say, to some extent. Whereas dark social is this kind of community, unmeasurable conversations that are happening between friends. And I think they can definitely intersect, but that's more so outside of your hands to some extent. You can't be as intentional with... Dark social is not an activity. Social selling can lead to dark social occurring as something that can happen in the background. So horrible way of answering that question. But I think that's the best I can do.
I love that. That's a great start. So Nicholas, and by the way, today you're Nicholas, okay? You're Nicholas Thickett, just so we can differentiate. Give me some specific examples of the way that social can be used for sales.
One of my favorite techniques is looking at the 3 to 5 voices that hold people's attention. Who do people trust for their information? Because right now we're so inundated with so much information. Where do you get your industry news and updates? Where are you going for your professional development and role? Find those people that your customers trust. So the roles that you want to sell to, and then go and hit the bell on those 3 to 5 people. And every day, just do 10 minutes or 30 minutes, just comment on those people's posts, and then go through those comments and find people that have a similar role that you want to sell to. But don't go and comment just to go and try to get a meeting. Try to understand what they don't understand about their role to go and lead you to go and be able to sell something. And then more conversations, you continue with that, the way you go. Morgan, looks like you have something you want to add.
I was just going to jump in. I have a quick story on this because I think it's really a weird idea to say, okay, Will Aitken follows influencer X. Let me hop into influencer X's comment section to get the attention of Will Aitken. Because that feels like, what? I'm supposed to be talking to Will Aitken, not this influencer. But the point is what Nick was talking about. Will goes to influencer X to get industry news, to get professional development, and probably is looking through the comments because they have questions, because they're like, I wonder what other people are talking about this. And if you're showing up in that area as well, they will also look to you as somebody that maybe is as a peer instead of as an influencer that, you can talk to, or you can have a conversation with. So you're sort of warming them up in an indirect way.
I love that. So what are some of if I'm a new sales leader and I want to start deploying a social selling strategy with my team, Morgan, how am I going to look at that? What are kind of the pillars that I need to start with?
Well, I would recommend benchmarking something. I don't think it's a bad idea to sort of do like channel performance, because to sort of look at how well your sales team performs on the phones and emails and then map it to pipeline. I think the same needs to be done for social. And there's some data tools like LinkedIn Sales Insights that can help with that. But really, from a fundamental level, it is equipping your sellers with a process for using LinkedIn. And just like you equip them with a process to cold call, or equip them with a process to do emails and email follow-ups, it's the same sort of thing. I think whenever we talk with sales teams or work with our clients, like it feels like this big universe. And if you, in our experience, if a sales manager, director, or VP of sales says, we're going to do social selling, every seller says, what, you want us to post content on LinkedIn? And like, that's not necessarily a process, right? Instead, it's, let's use LinkedIn Sales Navigator to create lists. Let's be targeted in our approach. Let's, warm up in the comments. And then, 30 minutes a day, this is what we expect our managers to use. That's sort of like a starting point. But really, the concept is to have a process, I think, that a sales team could use.
I love that. So Jen, obviously Lavender, better than maybe any other company right now, does this really well, right? I think, Will Allred, everything's done the last couple of years with building his brand online. So what if you're stepping in as a sales leader, Jen, and this is new, and you want to try and get to a point like where Lavender got? How would you approach that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things they've done uniquely well is it's not someone's job, right? It's not like you're in sales, it's your job. It's not you're in marketing, it's your job. If you look at the 14 employees we have at the company right now, everybody is showing up significantly on LinkedIn because that's where a lot of our target audience is. So importantly, like you could do the best job social selling in the world. If your audience doesn't live there, it doesn't really matter how good you are at it. But I think that's something that this business really, really understands. And so when you look at our lead forms, literally in the past week, with the exception of, I think, 2, every single one of the lead sources has been LinkedIn. So it's just, if you're selling to salespeople, I think it makes a really good opportunity. And again, don't make it someone's job, make it the organization's job to have a point of view and be present there.
I love that. And you mentioned different channels, and actually Dean LeBay here, our buddy Dean, asked that other question. So Nicholas, what other platforms could we tie in here? We're thinking LinkedIn. This is going to be primarily around LinkedIn. Let's dip our toe in this water. How could we use Instagram or Clubhouse or TikTok?
Fantastic question. Hey, Dean. So one of the things that we found when me and Morgan started doing account research and mapping with our customers is that different roles go different places to learn and interact with peers. And it doesn't take that long, whether it's a Google search, going through their social profiles to see where they show up. So our joke is, where are their signs of life? And when you find enough people coming together, prioritize those channels. We've talked to people, hey Morgan, that Slack's their go-to, WhatsApp. There's some people that just rely on texting. There's other people that there's some
Redditors.
specialty like peer-to-peer social platforms, like for medical professionals that I had never heard of before. Reddit. But the thing is, instead of playing this guessing game and just picking what you want and what you think is easy, the hard part is scoring those to figure out where they show up. So it's the path of least resistance, because I'd rather be the voice they want to learn from, or be in a place that they're asking questions and they feel comfortable to do that and just chime in.
I love that
I
you
love
said learn from. And sorry, Morgan, I'll let you follow up in a second. But Will, I mean, that's one thing that you did with Sales Feed, which blew everyone out of the water, was you were giving like so many, it was by TikTok, and you have such a great sense of humor, and now you're wearing a suit. But how do you make all that work, Will? Like how do you do that?
Yeah, I think, like, to be honest, I'm probably like, I think there's the distinction to make between social selling and personal brand. Like at this point, I'm probably deemed an influencer more than a social seller, right? But when I was selling to salespeople, it's more about getting involved in those conversations, and I think it's about like where you can provide value. And a lot of the times, I wasn't providing value to the decision makers themselves. Like I was providing value to the sellers on their team. And so what they were doing were like grabbing my post, copying it, and sending it in their Slack channels to their team. So that like I wouldn't be trying to make content for decision makers. I think sometimes sellers probably don't know as much about, let's say, if you're selling to HR leaders, let's not pretend that we know as much about HR as these people. But you can share and curate resources for them that could be helpful for them, or even less senior members of their team. And then that's how you build a name for yourself. So yeah, I'd just be looking for places to share insights, and more so, if you're not an expert in that field, then don't create in that field, but more so just get involved in those conversations that are already happening.
So that's a great answer. And Lauren, he is going to a wedding. Will and I are crashing Jen's wedding next month.
Every time Nick asks me a question, I'm gonna take off an item of clothing. It's like a waiter in the buff situation here.
I'm really glad I'm leaving in 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
What, you don't want to see this, Jen? I don't know. I think it's worth
My
it.
bachelorette party is literally this weekend, so this is a perfect kickstart to this. Thank you, Will.
So Jason's asking, what about taking initiative if your company maybe doesn't have a plan? And I think this is dicey because there are like half of companies don't want you posting on social, right? They look at your LinkedIn. You own your LinkedIn. And if anyone wants to fight me on that, I will die on that hill. But how do you approach that? Like, Morgan, what if the leadership above me isn't interested in this kind of strategy? Like, how do I approach it as an individual?
It's a great question. It's something we hear a lot because, when you work at some startup SaaS company, most of the time they're like, yeah, whatever. But when you start working in maybe more traditional IT or other industries that aren't, with the program yet, there's a lot of resistance to this. And my honest piece of advice is, fine, don't post anything. Just go and engage. If you can run up against leadership all you want, like it's really up to you how much you feel you have the wherewithal, the energy, the interest to sort of butt heads with sales managers or directors about it. But the best part is any social platform, whether it's LinkedIn or otherwise, there's so much activity, there's so much community in the comments, right? There's so much stuff you can do just by engaging with other people. And it's not, the algorithm will promote it every once in a while. So if your sales manager follows you, they'll say, oh, Morgan commented on this post. What is he doing? Sort of thing. But wow, Will is really getting undressed.
Stop it, Will.
We're going through this.
This is a
I'm
family show, Will.
By this handsome man in the bottom of the screen. Anyways,
all of his sister's friends are going wild right now.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. All of his sister's friends are. So yeah, I think it is on you to take initiative, but it doesn't necessarily rely only on content. And there's lots of other ways to take initiative than just, say, posting every day for a week, or developing a personal brand.
So I often talk to people and I say, look, there's 3 ways you can kind of social sell on LinkedIn. You can either create content, curate content, so essentially become a news source, or you can comment on content. How do you look at that, Nicholas? Like, is one of those key? Do you need a mix of those? How do you approach that?
I actually go in reverse order as you said it, because what I find is nothing is more dangerous and scary than a blank page. And so, how do you know what's going to resonate if you don't try? And so, when I talked about originally about the leaders like all of you guys that have a community in the comments, go look through and just start commenting, see what resonates, and then try posting it. Because then you're getting a really strong understand. And this is actually why I think sellers, I'm not going to say are better at marketing, but have an advantage over a lot of marketers. Is because we get to validate one-to-one before we go one-to-many. And so I start with comments and then I work my way up the ladder as my comfort and confidence builds. And that's what I would recommend.
I love that. And great question here from Joshua Bailey. How can marketing provide best practices to their sales teams to equip them with the tools to get into the social selling world? And I love that because I think it is a whole go-to-market strategy. So Jen, how do you think about that?
You got to say the question over because I was just writing an answer and wasn't paying attention.
So how can marketing provide best practices to their sales team to equip them with the tools to get into the social selling world?
I love this question. Don't write scripts for them, right? I think the best possible thing you can have is your every employee's own unique voice. And this was the mistake I made a lot. I just tried to sound really smart, tried to sound really professional, tried to sound like I'm a researcher. And I wasn't. And it wasn't something that people wanted to connect with. So I think the best thing that marketing can do is say, here's the point of view we want to represent. Here is the here's the conventional wisdom around it. Here's the way we want to disrupt it. And then get people to understand deeply the point of view, but don't tell them and say it in this way. I think that's where you actually see the beauty. And that's why corporate accounts rarely do as well as personal accounts, because they're too boring. They're too static.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, because B2C
on there as well.
I'm going to give it right to you, Will, but B2C is sexy, right? B2C, we're selling chicken wings and Nikes and beer. B2C, we're selling, tech and tools. So Will, what's your approach?
Well, I was just going to tack on to what Jen was saying there. Like a lot of, I think, marketing teams get it wrong when it comes to social selling, and they treat it like employee advocacy instead, which is share the company's blog or article or like and comment on a page post or whatever that may be. That doesn't count. And it's not effective probably, and it's probably really not doing you any favors. In fact, it's probably just annoying the sales team and making them less interested in actually doing this right. Yeah, I would say just more so, if you're going to encourage them to do it, then probably send them to people who are doing it right. Send them examples and stories of people who are doing something successfully. Salespeople like to do things that the other people are doing well. Like if you're in the office, back in the day when I saw someone use a little ejection handle on the phone or use a certain opener, I'd absorb that. I'd be like, they're good. I want to do what they're doing. So send them examples of what success looks like. Nick, Morgan, both great people to follow. They have some great content on the topic as well. And then say, hey, I'd say that's probably the best way to enable someone, because you got to let them be their own voice. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
Can I chime in on this, Nick?
Please do.
So one of the things I see with a lot of marketing trying to support sales is they try to script. But what happens, sales is a tacit knowledge, which is pattern recognition. So people need to see good examples. So give them the theme, give them prompts to write on, and let them embrace their natural voice, and then celebrate them when they do it. Positive recognition will get people to do it more and more. So add it into a weekly meeting, add it into a monthly meeting, show those best examples. What do they call it in marketing, Morgan? Is it a swipe file?
Yeah,
like best practices. And just put a swipe file together so people can see the best in different mediums and get inspired from what other people are doing. And then all that trial and error is gathered in one spot, and you're doing it as a team instead of trying to tackle it in your own little silo in your lonely island.
And just to dogpile real quick, Nick,
please.
I think the last thing I see marketing sort of, it's a desire for control, and usually at a high level, it's about brand consistency is the main fear that I hear a lot of CMOs and VPs of marketing talk about, which is, well, on these social channels, we need to make sure we're brand consistent. And it's like, well, have you ever listened to a sales call? Like, well, have individuals, and Jen said this really well, like have individuals express their unique voice. In social selling, it is about the individual salesperson. So if it doesn't sound like the individual salesperson, it's not really going to work. Brand guidelines are fine. Professional guidelines about like, hey, let's not cuss out our competitors. That's totally fair play, I think, right? But like when it comes to, well, you need to talk about these things in these ways, I think it just shoots the effort in the foot before it gets out the door. And I understand that desire. I was a brand strategist for a long time, but it's just not working anymore.
No, you're 100% right. But I wanted to come to what Joshua said. By the way, Joshua, have a Scotch egg and an 80 shilling for me in wherever you are in Scotland right now. But I think, Joshua is actually with Overpass, and I'm very familiar with Overpass. They do sales freelancers around the world. But I think, Joshua, I would think about like telling the stories of like, wins that your clients have had from using Overpass. I think that would be like a really good approach. To me, that's kind of a no-brainer. Because so many people are looking for, different ways to generate more pipelines. So just something to consider there, Joshua. So Jen, let me ask you this. How do you know if your company is actually like a good fit to social sell? Do you have to like look at your team of who you have and analyze it on a case-by-case basis, or can anyone social sell?
Oh, I'm glad you gave me a leading question because I would have completely neglected that part of the answer. I think there's two things that are important. One is exactly what you just said. You cannot force people to do something they are uncomfortable with. You should encourage them to try, because oftentimes you never know that you're good at something until you do it enough times to actually make that call. So I would say everybody should try. But if it's unnatural, it's uncomfortable, it's falling flat, don't just keep doing it because everybody tells you got to social sell. So that's piece one. Piece two is, I would say this is something that's I ask this question at sales organizations all the time and they rarely know the answer. Where do your customers go to learn? Right? It's such a simple thing, but when they have a problem, not when they're looking to buy, when they have a problem, is it a community? Is it a person? Is it a channel? Is it an event? Is it a publication? What is it? And then use that to inform, if we ask people to spend time on social, what channel should it be on and how much should we have them spend? Because if 10% of their learning happens in social, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't social sell. That's my opinion.
Morgan, follow up on that. I'd love to hear what you got to say.
I don't think I think I don't have anything to add.
Jen just landed that plane. Okay.
I just read Morgan's guide to prospecting on LinkedIn, so that's where all my good answers are coming from. Sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. If you have questions, drop in the chat. I will make sure to get to them. So, Nicholas, how do you navigate like employer resistance and rules of engagement? We touched on that earlier, but what I love about you, Nicholas, is you're very straight and to the point. So, how do you fight that battle?
If I was tackling this as an employer, the one thing that people need to see is a standard of excellence. But the thing is, if you're parenting or anything, you don't magically get it right the first time. And so I think employers need to take the responsibility of being the referee and not the drill sergeant. And so if we referee to go and guide people to raising the bar consistently over time, that is how you win. But also encouraging others to share so that it's a team effort, not an individual, because we all saw what the Flames did back in the day, and there's no cup to show for it. So that
time out. That's a hockey reference for those you didn't follow. And there's no Stanley Cup banners in Calgary. They're all in Montreal. Just FYI. Sorry, Nicholas.
Montreal has banners.
24 of them, pal.
I can't say anything. Our team, Oilers, haven't done anything. Flames, we can move on.
All right. Were you wrapped on that, Nicholas? I interrupted you. I'm sorry. You lobbed me such a softball. I had to take advantage.
No, I just wish that companies would play more of the referee and then just help them, like give them prompts, give them guidance, and slowly raise the bar over time. The one thing that I see happen more often than not is, like I was kind of saying earlier, all this is pattern recognition. It's a tacit knowledge. And once we set a standard of excellence and we keep raising it and we keep sharing all that trial and error as we're learning, that's what gets people to go and start from where we left off, not just always starting fresh. So most companies don't save any of that. Nobody talks about how they approach it. And so it's the hardest thing. Like, that's a big lift for somebody walking into a new organization as an insider and say, hey, I'm going to go and tackle this challenge from ground zero. But if you're starting from step 55 out of 100,
right,
that's a lot, a lot easier.
Will, I got a question for you, but first, if you could just kick out Sam, who said the Bruins are better than the Habs. Like I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. For Stanley Cup's trying to talk at me. So Will, one of the things that you got so good at, because you're addicted to your phone, but you lived on social media
Some of
the
my
last
wife.
year and a half.
Sorry, go on. I lived on. Yeah, keep going. Sorry, it's made it funny.
I would really like to, yeah, I know. I would really like to dig into like really how to leverage comments. And I would actually like a few different point of views on this, but Will, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, let's get real tactical here for a second. Social selling, right, is like this extra thing in your weapon arsenal of things that you can sell with, right? So you can make cold calls, you can make emails, you can send LinkedIn DMs, which to me isn't really part of social selling. Even though they're on a social media platform, it's more about the commenting, the liking, the being present there. But what you're trying to do is build familiarity and awareness with your prospects so that the other touches can convert, or they can come inbound when they start looking for things, right? So like for me, commenting is like one of the easiest ways to do that, right? You can, if they're posting, especially if they're posting and no one else is engaging, because that's not a good feeling. Like a lot of these senior decision makers at these companies are trying to build brands, but the content's not very good. You can be their kind of like little cheerleader in the comment section there, making them feel special. Guess what? 2 weeks later, when you're the only person who's commented on their post for 2 weeks, you're now their best friend. You're making them feel like they've got something important to say. And you haven't tried to sold in any of those messages, by the way. So to me, if I was going to start from ground zero today I would probably go the commenting route, liking, commenting, engaging as a way to warm up my prospects as part of my sequences over a period of time. And I would probably be either commenting insightful things that I've heard from other customers like them during our conversations, because we as sellers have that luxury of talking to many customers, and probably more customers than they speak to themselves in their space. And the second thing is probably asking them questions to get them to elaborate further. So I can probably learn some genuine curiosity. It's a good opportunity for you to learn more about your customers.
I love that. Just real quick, Jean-François, merci. Salut la visite. Okay, sorry, I had to get that in there. Morgan, take off from there. I want to hear your thoughts.
So I think at a real tactical ground floor, we often talk about like 4 frameworks to use for a comment. Because the least useful comment is great post. So the more that you can do to avoid great post, the better off you will be. Thanks for sharing is one step above great post. So we're going to gradually work to the top tier here.
So these auto-generated prompts that are basically on your LinkedIn, the
right,
thanks, comma, name.
Yeah, that's not worth the time. Because think about this. Instead of thinking about it as a response, think of it as trying to kickstart a conversation. So they just said something interesting in their post, or you hope they said something interesting in their post. How do you continue that conversation? Well, one, you could ask a question so you could get curious, right? Wow, really love this insight. It's a listicle. Number 5 really speaks to me. What do you think about this? Okay. Number 2 is first to insight. So do you have something useful to add to this conversation? Can you add something, extend the conversation with something insightful? You know, I talk to a lot of directors like you, and they keep on bringing this up, and it's something unique or a unique perspective. And you could tie in a question to that, or like, it's something I see a lot. Click, publish. Third is a tag team, right? Tag somebody in. You don't have to do this all by yourself. And ideally, if you are active on the platform, it's not necessarily just people from your company. It's not just folks in your social selling squad. It could be somebody else that you've met on the platform. Be like, hey, have you ever thought of this? And tag somebody in. You can use that with prospects when it's the right time. It's a little dicier. And then lastly, my all-time favorite is the joke comment. I've won a lot of meetings off of writing jokes and comments. It's dicey because it's all written, so emojis are your friend. But the more that you can communicate that it's funny or it's supposed to be deadpan humor, I think the better off you'll be.
I can't tell you how many times that I become the top liked, the most referenced comment because I did something funny and I wasn't even trying to be funny, but I didn't want to just say great post, right? Mm-hmm. I think another way too, Nicholas, and I don't think anyone covered this. If we did, I apologize. But Nick, I think that there's also a lot of people asking questions in the comments, right? And I think that is a massive opportunity that frankly, most people don't think about. And I think that's gold. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, like one of the things I noticed is as more people showed up in my comments, it was really hard to get to all those comments as well. And so even that influencer that's posting, they might not have time to go through every single one. So you can be that voice that goes through and answers those questions, that builds trust. And the way I frame it, the way I think about it is when you're in it, somebody's delivering a keynote in an auditorium and you're sitting there listening, when it comes to the Q&A and you stand up and ask your question or make a statement to go and dive deeper, where are the eyes when you're asking that question? They're on you. So you're contributing, you're being part of that conversation. So you're adding value. So if everybody thinks of commenting like standing in a packed auditorium, and you may not have that audience when you first start, but when you get in these, you're packed auditorium, you're answering questions, you're being part of that dynamic discussion, you're going to get recognized for that. And there is trust through association.
Absolutely. And Eddie, I'm not going to keep talking French because I'd be the only one, but next time I come to Ottawa, we'll go to Works for a burger. A lot of Canadiana today. I love that. I love that. Okay, so let me ask you this, guys. Exactly how much time should we be committing to this? Because it sounds great, but Morgan, you can also get lost in LinkedIn. It's happened to me. I have to now time block certain periods so that I don't live in this space all the time. But, how do you approach that? Like, what should your, North Star be on that?
My guideline's always like 30 minutes to start. So, and here's the thing, there's sort of a lot of work. If you think about that goes into that 30 minutes. If you think about when you set up a sequencer or you're prospecting cold outbound, you're actually doing a lot of upfront work before you go and spend that time running the sequencer, writing the emails, dialing the cold calls. So the same goes for LinkedIn. I rarely scroll my feed. I'll be honest with y'all. I used to, and then I fell into the same trap that Nick, you had just laid out, where it would be like 45 minutes later and I'd be like, what the hell is happening basically? And now it's okay. I have a few influencers I've actually pulled into a separate document with their activity feeds on that I check instead of using LinkedIn's bell. I've never had good luck with the bell. My notifications are overwhelmed as they are, so I usually miss out on them, to find the content and engage with it. So usually the 30 minutes at a bare minimum I'm spending in the morning is me personally. I post content. So I'll post a thing or I'll engage, post a thing of content, watch the comments for a little bit, move on with my day. I got other stuff to do. And then somewhere in the middle of the day, I might check in. Some days I can't because I'm too busy. But then by the end of the day, I usually spend another, 25, 30 minutes maybe engaging again on what people are saying and doing some more like outbound prospecting work, maybe some sales navigator. It depends on the day. So really like an hour at most split across a day is like a really good amount of time. But that could be a ceiling for you. You don't necessarily have to hit that.
Right. I love that. I think what's interesting, so actually a friend of Social, Nick Bennett, we all love Nick here, just launched Social Digest. I think it's .co if I'm not mistaken. And basically, because the bell doesn't work properly, sorry, LinkedIn, it doesn't. The reality is that like I have an Excel spreadsheet of like hundreds of people that I follow, and I'm literally going through. It's so time consuming. I'd love a way to automate it. But, and hopefully, Nick and Rui, his partner, are going to solve this problem. Which would be amazing. But Nicholas, like, how do you handle that right now? Because there are certain people's posts I cannot miss. And if I didn't know Will Aiken and I was trying to get in front of Will Aiken and I was because no matter how big Will Aiken is, and he's big, you still have FOMO when you click post. Everybody, or it's not FOMO. You have, you're afraid. There's that self-doubt, right? So when you're the first person on someone's comment or someone's post all the time, and then you want a meeting 2 weeks later, they're going to say yes every single time. So how do you do that, Nicholas? How can we like manually make this work right now so that I'm not spending 45 minutes a day going through an Excel spreadsheet, or is that what I'm stuck with?
The unfortunate answer is that it's a little bit more manual, but what I've noticed with sellers is even if they get select accounts, throw all those accounts into an account list on Sales Navigator, figure out who you need to talk to move a deal forward, or continue your account research, throw them in a lead list. And then what I do, but you could do that with influencers too. Just put them in there.
Yep.
And then what you do in your 30-minute block is you just open up Sales Nav, go to sort by leads, go by updates, and all you do for 30 minutes is just work through that list as much as you can.
Yep.
And if you only get three is still better than none.
And a great tip is that what I'll do, so I'll have these links, but I won't go to just Morgan Smith's page. I'll go to Morgan Smith, see all activity, click posts, and then that's what I'm bookmarking. So I'm saving those 3 clicks every time, which literally is almost as much time as I'm going to spend on going through Morgan's posts. So very efficient. Morgan, you got any tips on how to handle that, or did Nicholas cover it?
No, I think that's about it. It's pretty manual for now. I'm sure somebody will come up with something interesting within the next.
Nick Bennett solving a problem. I love that.
I know, right?
But Will, what happens, Will, and I'll wrap up with how much time you should be spending on this, but Will, like, I know you and I have had conversations, we can get like so obsessed with it. Like, and I know Nicholas gave his framework, but you know, how do you walk away? How do you like not, and then it's a problem you and I both have. How do you not do that last comment?
I think it's a bit of, if you're going to be intentional about it, then time block, and then everything else is more just social scrolling, right? It's recreational scrolling. So time block for the stuff that you really need to do, the stuff that's going to be related to your prospecting, your sales activities. Make a half an hour block in your calendar, maybe twice a day. And then for anything else, you know, if that's after work, then look at your phone. But during the day, you should try and get yourself away from the distractions anyway. Yep. You know, I live on LinkedIn. I'm a content creator. It's like my whole job. So I'm probably a little bit more guilty of this than other people. But I can pick up my phone at 7 o'clock at night and there might be a post there. To tack on to what Morgan and Nick were saying as well about, like, if you want to see a certain person's post, if you start engaging with the same people over and over and over and over again, LinkedIn's algorithm is actually remarkably good at kind of showing you their content. People like them or from there. You really need to put in the work up front to engage and like let the algorithm know what you want to see. I've never had the bell on for Jen. Sorry, give me a second. I'm going to turn my notifications off because
turn that bell off.
I'm going to turn the bell off. Now the bell's working, eh? I put do not disturb on real quick. Yeah, but the point is, like, the algorithm will kind of teach you if you put the work in up front, then it will show you. I've never subscribed to or put the bell on for Jen. I think I did once, but then I turned all bell notifications off because they started annoying me. And I still see every single one of Jen's posts. At least I think so. I see one a day at least. So like, comment, engage with those posts, and you're probably going to get shown them again in the future.
But I just heard the other day, sorry, Morgan, that if you're regularly messaging someone in LinkedIn, in the DMs, is that where you're going, Morgan? Okay, that you're more likely to see them in their feed, right? So I know you, me, and Jen Will are in all kinds of group chats. So is that why, Morgan?
Yeah, basically what we you know, it's a black box. Nobody knows for sure. But what the pattern we see across lots and lots of sales teams and our own work is that if you're DMing with somebody, your content and their content is promoted in the respective feeds. So it's actually a really creative way, if you think about content as a nurture sequence for prospects instead of just a personal branding exercise. That if your content is a nurture sequence, then your DMs with that prospect being able to kickstart a conversation helps promote the content in their feed natively, which is sort of like a add-on domino effect that can really work to your benefit.
Yeah.
Can I tag in on that, Nick?
Please do, Nick.
I did an experiment with Morgan, and we actually went and tracked how, like, if you were look at your input time, how much time it took to actually book a meeting with someone. 98% of the time, it was 12 to 15 minutes. The other 2% that fell outside of that were people that reignited the conversation because of content. So if you don't get them in that first conversation right away, you're almost better off just nurturing them with content, leaving it alone instead of following up.
Yeah. Interesting. Morgan, you were going to say something?
No.
Okay. I thought your lips were moving. Real quick, I wanted to mention this from Riley. First of all, if you're not following Riley, you should, because he's a great guy. Big friend of Social. So we love Riley here. And he says you can't miss Jen and Tara's posts. And I think part of the reason you don't want to miss those posts is they're such great writers. And, you know, I might be an okay talker. I'm a terrible writer. And actually writing copy is a big problem for me and something I'm trying to get better at. It's one of my to-do lists for 2023. And Tara, if you're not following her, is very encouraging at getting you to write, gives you a lot of tools for starting to write. But real quick, Morgan, we were talking, you were in the studios here actually a couple of weeks ago in Phoenix, in Scottsdale. And I said, I need help with copy. And you recommended a book called Everybody Writes by Ann Handley. I'm about 30 pages in. It's taken me 2 hours because I'm taking so many notes from this book, literally line by line. So I don't have a picture of it right here. I apologize, but Everybody Writes by Ann Handley. Morgan, thanks for that tip. That was super helpful.
You're so welcome. It's a book I'm just starting to recommend to everybody who wants to get better at writing. It's funny, it's practical, it's so good.
Love it. Okay, let's get to the brass tacks. Nicholas, let's talk about tools. What tool by the way, I'm going to do a quick timeout. Can you tell us, Nick, actually, I'm going to let Morgan do this because Nicholas, I want to follow up with the question. Morgan, tell me what a line does in 30 seconds. Hold on, let me get the timer ready. You can pitch slap us right now. I know we weren't even, you're not ready for this. So I'm going to give you a 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, pitch me.
So when companies are struggling with basically adopting social inside their team, what they find is that sellers need a process, an actual workflow, not just nice pointers, not just tips and tricks, but a way to integrate that into their sales process. And that's what we help companies do. We do that with training. We do that with on-site workshops and digital workshops. And we do that with enablement documentation follow-ups. So whenever we're gone, the sales team still has everything they need.
Turn that bell off.
Well done.
That was great. So if you're looking, guys, or the people in the audience, if you're looking for how do I actually do this, if you want it done for you, these are the guys you're talking to. So Nick, back to what I was asking about the tools. Take me through the tools. I want to do it myself. I want to take a stab at it myself. By the way, Will's off camera because he's eating right now and I can see him off. Buddy, I don't know how you put that whole burrito in your mouth like that. I mean, that was like 45 seconds. You downed a whole Chipotle burrito. So
I'm a big guy. You know this.
But Nick, back to the question: what tech do I need to really put fire or gas on this fire?
I only recommend getting Sales Navigator only because going back to Will's point earlier about not getting lost in feed, is I try to go and set up all my workflows in Sales Navigator, and then I leave my personal scrolling to LinkedIn so that I can just stay focused. And the other way you can do this is if you have, whether it's with your Microsoft or Google Docs, is just create a doc that takes you through steps 1 through 10. And say you're going to follow up those people's posts, put the hyperlink of their activities above that and just click your way down and then follow those prompts and away you go. Like, you don't need a lot. I think that's why so many people don't do social.
I'm sorry, that was really interesting, but you went through it really quick. Can you please reiterate that? Because I think that was very, very valuable.
Yeah. So what we like to do is we like to go and create a document that is like a step 1 through 10 that is very simple for anyone to follow. And so say using the influencer posts, what you do is you create a doc. On the top of the doc, you hyperlink the influencer's activity page. And say you have 5 of those. Then below, you have the exact steps of what you need to do. With that, you can keep adding additional information. So there's different prompts that you like to use, like what Morgan was laying out for commenting. Or say you're doing this with events. What companies are putting out good events? Hyperlink their pages to the event page. Run through how you would go and work an event. Like, okay, do you want to go into the chat? Trick, but please don't abuse this. As soon as you register for an event, even though you're not connected, it unlocks messaging to those people. So if you find a hyper niche area that you want, that somebody's learning to get better at something you sell, if you join in, get in the chat or message them, there's instant context to start a conversation and be an asset.
Okay. I don't know if you caught that. If you didn't, watch the replay because that was so much gold. This is fascinating. And I think too, I've just connected with you guys over the last 6 months and just having these conversations, like I was trying to social sell and I was very successful with it. I think. Then I realized I was doing about 10% that was actually best practices, or I didn't have a process. It was just throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what stuck. So, things like that are so valuable, and that's really exciting. That gets me excited. So, Will, you were really an interesting case because, and I think there is a crossover between influence and social selling in terms of becoming, let's say, a creator or an influencer, but you skyrocketed with what you did with sales feed. So for you, it worked really quickly, but how long would it take, Will, for someone who's just starting now to actually start to get some traction on January 13th, 2023?
I don't think it's fair to compare sales feed to selling, because my job at sales feed is a full-time creator, right? And most sellers don't have that much time on their hands. Now, if I draw the parallels between what I was doing there and what I was doing when I was an account executive at Proposify, the results I saw from social selling at that point were huge. But you know, that was back when I had like 6,000 followers, and I've now got 36,000, right? So,
Sorry.
no, that's all good. That's all good. Just move me up here. I'm going to replace you. 1 second. Get out of my way. There you go. Just in case you do that again, all right, buddy? All right, don't forget who knows how to use the tools around here, Boomer, okay? All right, where was I? Point is, when I was working for Proposify, I started creating content, I started commenting on people, I started getting involved in LinkedIn. I'd comment on stuff like, even like, you know, like Sarah Brazier would be the classic example, right? Because a lot of my prospects were VPs of sales, and they would see that stuff, right? They would see those comments, and then I'd have a comment go viral on even like Corporate Bros post, right? And from that, like Morgan said, the results that we actually started to see very quickly were like, one, less so inbound leads. People would message me like, hey, I'm looking for proposal software. I've seen your stuff around. Can we chat? That happened every now and again. Felt good when it did. Really good. That got more and more the larger the content got, and more I began creating. However, more so, even when you look at outside of prospecting, the top end of the funnel, my prospects were connecting with me after the discovery call, the intro call, or when we had booked a call together, and they were seeing all my activity pop up on their feed as we were doing so. Again, because we were just connected. When you're freshly connected with someone, they see more of your stuff. And I was often sending them messages and stuff. And that was then keeping them warm and building that relationship with them even when we weren't on the call together. That, to me, is another massive impact of social selling, is building trust with prospects who are already in your pipeline, building awareness. So that way, between calls, sometimes up to a week, maybe even 2 weeks, ideally you're not booking next steps 2 weeks out, but between then, they'd see a couple of my posts, maybe a couple of the comments I'd made. And then when we jump back on the call, they were like, hey, Will, you know, there was a little something more to them, because they felt like they knew me a little bit better. I built relationships with them even when we weren't on the call. I think that's another massive impact of social selling. It's building awareness and relationships, not only with the top of the funnel, people who don't know you, the people who you're already talking to as well.
So funny story of how this actually applies, because Will, I did a tour in June for Demo Stack. I was on the road for 30 days, and Will traveled with me, and Will had not left Canada like since COVID happened, and I had been everywhere. So we did this event at a WeWork in Denver, and there was like 10 of us outside, you know, shooting the breeze. And this guy, this big guy, I'm a big guy. People don't realize I'm a big guy. I'm standing next to Will. Will's even bigger than me. And this big guy comes up, and he's like getting like next to Will and like staring at him. And I'm like, is this like an unhoused guy? Like, am I gonna have to have a hockey fight here? And he goes to Will. He's like, are you that sales TikTok guy? Are you that? And Will was like, yes, I am. Nick, get this on video. Get this on video. So true story, and that was Will's genuine reaction.
Can I actually dogpile on that idea, Nick, real quick? I think there's really two. I think we often confuse attention for credibility, which is why there's a lot of focus on like personal branding, getting followers, getting engagement, because it's like, oh, we want attention, because the more attention I get, the more credible I'll be. And that is not necessarily the case. All right, it's a Venn diagram. There's definitely some overlap here. I think the reason Will is credible to a lot of audiences because he's actually giving a long-term reason for people to pay attention to him. And that's being consistent, being generous, being building trust, delivering value. Like all of these things that are built up over time are the reason that people continue to pay attention to Will and pay attention to you, Nick, because that's how you're showing up. But that's not necessarily the same thing as, oh, right, I'm going to go get a lot of attention. I can go get a lot of attention tomorrow, right? I could post some hilarious clickbaity thing and get all of the engagements and likes that I want, but that's not going to serve me anything, right? It's just attention. It's not really credibility.
By the way, if you're in the audience and you're not connected to one of the four of us, when I'm on a webinar, what I'm doing in that webinar is A, I'm connecting to the speakers. Hey, watching at this thing. B, I'm connecting to everyone who's commenting regularly, right? So if you haven't connected with the four of us, may I highly suggest you do that. So let's talk about now actually engagement. We only got about 8 minutes left here. Let's talk about like really good engagement, Nicholas. How do you handle that? How do you make it so that you're sticky and you're actually developing these conversations you want to have? You know, how do we get past the nice post?
So I'm actually going to go and give Will credit for this, because he made a comment few months back about how to go and capture really good content. And it tied to something me and Morgan learned through a content course of you're continuing the narrative that somebody has in their head. And so writing down those key moments that there's a switch, that somebody just gets it, write them down and have them handy as you're commenting and use those. You don't have to recreate the wheel. You'll find that a lot of the time there's 3 to 5 prompts that you can reuse over and over. And the other thing is, if you're worried, do an accusation audit. It's from Chris Voss.
What's an accusation audit, Nick?
It's, you think about what are those questions that people would ask you to challenge you, because a good champion's going to challenge you.
Oh, interesting.
And so what you're doing is you're mapping out that conversation before it happens, so you have different ideas of where to take it, and it allows you to dive deeper and add value instead of great post.
Yeah.
Morgan, you want to follow up on that? Because I when I look at your content, I find you're really good at that.
Well, I appreciate it. I would say the actual principle comes back to something Nick half coined, which is vampire sales. So in folklore, vampires weren't allowed into your home unless if they were invited in. And so we think the same, at least on social, should apply to your pitch. You're not allowed to pitch unless if you're invited to. And so the entirety of my engagement strategy, from the kind of content that I post, the kind of comments that I have, the kinds of DMs that I send, are all geared towards great conversations, learning more about them, leaning in, saying, hey, did you see this article that X company posted? Because it's really relevant to this post that you just commented on. And I think that maybe there's something in here that you might want to have. And then that's like, oh, wow, I didn't know, that's a super interesting thing. Where did you find this? And then the conversation kicks off. And at some point in that conversation, my goal is to get them to say, so what do you do? That's the invitation.
That's it.
And if I can orient all of my content, all of my engagement around getting to that moment where instead of it's on me to say, hey, you should pay attention to me, but instead it's on them to say, okay, you got to tell me what you do, it just transforms everything. It just changes everything about the way that I approach social.
I love that. Will, looks like you're just dying to say something.
No,
or
it's
maybe the
like-
burrito's not sitting well.
When
I
you
don't
make
know.
me think of stuff, right? Like, it's like real life, right? When you're talking to someone, let's just say you're at a bar and you meet someone, you chat to them, and you show interest in them. Eventually, when you show enough interest in them and you have a good conversation, you're listening, there is an instinctual need for them to go, so what about you? What do you do? Right? That will come. That will come. But you wouldn't walk up to someone and just tell them what you did if they didn't ask. So cut that out, right? Make it about them. Make it about that. It could even be like, sometimes someone goes, yeah, I went to the Yukon. I'm like, no way, there's actually a place right near Yukon. Don't hijack their story, but that's like a good addition. Like, think of it like a comment. So like, if you treat social like an actual social interaction, you can have a much better time. Don't act like someone who doesn't, like you wouldn't if you weren't directly in front of them, right? So again, more analogies, but that conference analogy, standing up and asking questions, that kind of thing.
But you know what? It's so great because I'm in like a co-working space here. We have our studio in Scottsdale, but we're in a co-working space. Every time I'm in the elevator, and someone's like, hey, good morning. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Good day? Cool. Yeah. What do you do? I was asking, what do you do? Because it lines me up to say what I do. Right. So it works. All right. We got a couple minutes here. We got to wrap up. If you have a last question, drop it in. Otherwise, let's talk about Sales Navigator. And I cannot stress this enough. When Morgan was here in studio and he's just about Sales Navigator, I'm like, show me. And mind blown to a way that I'm like, I obviously have a rudimentary idea of how to use this tool. But because these guys like have it mastered. But Nick, how do I do I need a Sales Navigator license to social sell? Is that like a prerequisite, spending like the $90 a month?
No, not at all. It is a good idea if you want to just go and up the ante and be more efficient in your time blocks. But the reality is it's still sales. And I think this is the one thing that everybody forgets when we talk about social selling. They hire me and Morgan to go and add social to their tool belt. But the reason why they're adding social to their tool belt is because their emails and cold calls aren't working like they used to. Well, why not? Well, when you you dive into that, it's because there's no account research, there's no mapping, there's no nothing. So if you're doing all the proper steps, account research, building a strategy, figuring out where these people show up, then you can just use LinkedIn and search. And there's lots of fun ways, like the event hack I was talking about, the influencer hack, social listening. So you can go and search terms and just go find those people. But I will say the biggest limitation is, are you given accounts that you have to go and hunt, or are you given freedom in a territory to go and prospect the way you want? That's the biggest
That'll
thing.
change everything.
Yeah, I love that. Guys, we're going to wrap, but I got two quick things here. So Morgan, Joseph is asking, how do you guys use sales? Have you guys used Sales Insight? That was, you
Ooh.
showed me that and it blew my
Send
mind.
me a
But
DM.
Yeah, that's a long
That's the
combo.
short answer. Send me a DM, Joseph. I'll show you some cool stuff you can do with it. It is a big platform. And I will say, Nick, real quick,
Yep.
before this other question, if you haven't watched Will Aitken's Sales Navigator Masterclass video on YouTube, you should. It's on Sales Feed. It's very good. It's such a good
very
video.
good.
That's
so that's
first thing
Sales
on Google
Navigator.
now, by the way. By far our most
Sales
viewed video now. I'm doing a part 2 this week.
Well, it's
That's
hands
one
down the
more-
best one that's on YouTube, because you actually showed it and you broke it down. Nobody else did that.
No, let me grab that and put that in the comments of the old cheeky live, just in case anyone's known.
Yeah, do that. And then real quick, guys, just to wrap. So question from Chris Bogue. I know the answer, but should I post daily content on my LinkedIn company page as well? I mean, hells yes. Yeah. Does anyone disagree with that?
I'll post more than once a day. To be honest, if you have the time and capacity, post as much as you can. To be honest, that's always my response to anyone who I have. Whenever anyone asks me, how much should I be posting on TikTok? How much should I be posting on LinkedIn? As much as you can without burning yourself out, because ultimately it gives you some more shots at bat. Just make sure you focus on the quality and don't overdo the quantity. I see so many people who post every day, and the quality of their post just goes down and down because they're running out of shit to say. So as long as you can show up and give quality stuff, post as much as you can. I post on Sales Feed. I try to do 3 times a day.
If you don't know what to say, ping me. Like I'll give you a 5-minute tutorial on what I've repeated this on dozens of podcasts, like my technique for that, but it's super easy to take what you want to say. Real quick, guys, Morgan, where can we find Aligned?
Well, mostly on LinkedIn. You can come connect with us, search our names, connect, send a hello. You can also find the B2B Power Hour, which is our weekly live show, and podcast with a bunch of resources for not just social selling, but go-to-market and B2B sales and marketing. That's also on a LinkedIn page or b2bpowerhour.com. And Aligned is getaligned.co. There's not an E somewhere in it, but the easiest way to find it is you just go to my profile, and then you scroll down to my experience section, and then you find the little company entry that says Aligned, and then you click it, and then you click visit website. That's the easiest way to find Aligned, Nick.
Or you just go to Get Aligned and you just take the E out of Aligned. Appreciate you guys. Will, do we know what we're talking about next week yet?
Well, let's have you got a minute, Nick? We've got 1 minute left. Let's have a vote. We've got 2 topics. I'm juggling between. Number 1, how to go viral. Or number 2, ultimate social media tech stack. Would you like to learn about sales tech and hardware and software, or how to go viral and make it go viral?
Drop either viral or tech in the comments, please.
In the comments, viral or tech.
That's a hell of a poll.
Yeah, that's one hell of a poll. Listen, Morgan, Nicholas, appreciate you guys. Super fan over here of you, and super fan of everyone here who's at Social. This is when Will, Jen, and I got this started. This has taken off way more than we thought. The Slack channel is so active, it's shocking. So if get in there, there's so many great conversations. I'm learning so much, and the reason Will, Jen, and I built this was we wanted access to the best ideas in think tank. And this has become way better than we thought it could be. So, Will, I'll let you go through the comments. It looks actually pretty close on viral and tech.
It's looking neck and neck here. Regardless, if we don't do the viral one next week, we'll do the tech one. We'll do the next 2 weeks are going to be those 2 topics. This is. I'll actually do a count and figure it out. I think tech's winning right now. Actually, it's close, right. Really close.
Appreciate y'all. Nick, love you. Morgan, love you. Will, love you. Social followers, love you. Have a great weekend, everyone.